Hey guys, Sean here. Welcome to the F1 Word and to some of my thoughts on the brand new Ferrari that was launched earlier today and some of the news that has been doing the rounds since Tuesday and some news from the FIA. I'll get onto that a little bit later in the video. But first of all, let's take a look at the new F1-75. So first things first, yes, I know many of you may well have seen this yesterday when it was leaked on social media, something I think has happened with most teams so far, but it is always nice to see some proper official shots of it in all its glory. Yes, it's red, I know it's red, but what were we really expecting? This is Ferrari after all, and it is their brand, which is fine, totally expected, and it is a thing of beauty. And you know, it is so nice that despite the strict regulations, we are seeing teams go in different directions and we're seeing some innovation. I'm so pleased about that. Mattia Binotto spoke during the launch saying that the F1-75 is a brave design that has involved a lot of out-of-the-box thinking, and compared to what we've seen elsewhere, he ain't wrong. First of all, the team has gone with a radical nose design for this season and has constructed a modular nose concept rather than having one single section. Now that allows Ferrari more freedom to make changes and modify things without having to go through some new crash tests. And according to Giorgio Piola at Motorsport.com, this modular nose idea has never been seen before in F1. And if you love your technical stuff, that's quite exciting. It's also worth noting as well that with all the teams having to follow cost cap constraints, the ability to be able to go in there and make changes to their nose design will allow them to focus on other areas, focus their resources on other areas. It's a really smart idea and I'm quite surprised it's never been done before. We can also see some really different sculpting of the side pods versus what we've seen elsewhere with a, let's call it a dip, clearly visible. The triangular roll hoop and airbox that we all expected to return has returned, and the car features a pushrod front suspension layout and a pull rod at the rear. But side pod indent and nose aside, the thing I found most striking was how square or straight or flat, however you want to describe it, the side pods themselves are, or at least appear to be. There are a few bits on there that we've seen on other cars, like the gills we saw on the Aston. We've got some similar ones on the Ferrari. But of all the cars we've seen so far, the real cars we've seen so far, this one definitely appears to be the most radical. Now, obviously, most of you will know, usual disclaimer at this point, I am rubbish with the technical stuff. But as soon as it goes live, I will pop a link to any analysis from Matt Summerfield in the description and pinned in the comments. And I'll also include Giorgio Piola's article on the nose as well for those of you who might like a read. Ferrari has also confirmed that the car will get a run on Friday as it completes a demonstration run at Fiorano, and to confirm that run will be done in the full 2022 car. And there will be a filming day as well ahead of winter testing. So a couple of days of running before Barcelona for the F1-75. As for the livery, I think it looks great. I really do. Sure, a red Ferrari is a red Ferrari, but something about this year's paint job looks really slick. I think it's because, for starters, they've ditched that fade to the darker red at the rear that made the car look as though it had been dipped in barbecue sauce last year. And I'm a massive fan of the return of the black accents on the wings and elsewhere. And the whole thing reminds me of the Ferraris from the early 90s, especially the 1990 Ferrari. Absolutely beautiful. There were some rumours a few weeks back that the team were going to go with a darker red similar to what they ran at Mugello in 2020 for their 1000th Grand Prix, but I am so glad that turned out to be nonsense because I was not all that fussed about that livery. They have, though, definitely gone with a darker tone this year. I think it looks great. However, I'm sure some of you in the comments will tell me there are 100 things wrong with this livery, but I have only one personal complaint. It's the same complaint I've had for the last few years, and that is that bloody matte finish. It works on a Red Bull, for example, and I know from a technical point of view it saves weight, so that makes total sense. But for me, a Ferrari should have a glossy finish and should shine and glint in the sunlight. Yes, I know, it really doesn't bloody matter. It is just a personal preference, and despite that, I still think the car looks fantastic. There is a nod to the team's 75th anniversary near the airbox, and of course the name Santander returns to the car for the first time since 2017, but the Mission Winnow sponsorship, the title sponsorship, is now gone. All in all, I think the F1-75 is one hell of a good looking car, and like I say, this is the best overall package so far for me, but let me know what you think. That's it for the Ferrari launch then, and next up it's the turn of Mercedes, who will be pulling the covers off the W13 tomorrow morning, and I will of course be doing a video covering that as well. But before I go today, there are a few news stories I wanted to quickly run through that I think are well worth a mention, so here is the news in brief-ish. First up, FIA President Mohammed Ben Sulayem has revealed a new structure of F1 refereeing which will take effect from the first test in Barcelona next week. The changes were unanimously agreed by the F1 CEO and team principals and include a virtual race control room which will be created, which has been likened to VAR in football in that it will be positioned in one of the FIA offices as a backup outside the circuit and will work in real time with the race director to apply the sporting regulations using, quote, modern technological tools. Direct radio conversations between teams and race control will be removed in order to protect the race director from pressure and allow decisions to be made peacefully, but contact can still be made and questions asked provided they follow a, again quote, well-defined and non-intrusive process. Unlapping procedures under safety car conditions will be reassessed and presented to the next F1 Commission meeting ahead of the new season starting. And a big one, I'm sure for many of you, Michael Masi will not hold the role of race director but will get a new job elsewhere within the FIA. Instead, Masi will be replaced by Niels Wittig and Eduardo Freitas, who will alternate the race director role and will be assisted by Herbie Blasch, who will be their permanent senior advisor. In his statement, Mohammed Ben Sulayem added that without the referees there is no sport and that the structural changes are crucial, quote, in the context of strong development and the legitimate expectations of drivers, teams, manufacturers, organisers and the fans. The plan was handed to the World Motorsport Council and the Senate, who were all in full support, so we have a new race director structure going forward, and as I said earlier, that should all be in place in time for that test next week. Ross Brawn thinks it's unlikely that any teams have or will find a silver bullet in the new regulations to help them steal a march on their rivals early on, something his own team did back in 2009 with that famous double diffuser, of course. He did, however, admit that there are no guarantees that all possible loopholes have been closed off, however did state that the more robust regulations are more difficult to exploit. Brawn also warned that if a team had found something that gave them an advantage, it is unlikely we'll see it at Barcelona, and it is far more likely someone just springs it on the sport as a bit of a surprise. Meanwhile, the FIA has warned that it will not hesitate in taking action if it feels the regulations are being abused, as fears are now being raised that teams could start using tricks to flex the edges of the floor down to help them gain performance, flexing that would help seal the airflow under the car more efficiently and help boost the downforce levels. The FIA knows that is an area teams could try to exploit, and Nicholas Tombassis says they will be keeping a close eye on areas such as the floor and the diffuser for signs of flexing and will impose tests if needed to reduce any flexing and explain that the rules allow the governing body to intervene if they, quote, find that some abuse is taking place in certain areas. Nicholas Latifi and Alex Albon hit the track earlier this week to shake down the new Williams FW44, which looks stunning out on track, by the way. But the drivers have raised concerns over visibility, thanks in part to the new 18-inch wheels and tyre deflectors. Latifi said that the visibility was, quote, definitely worse in some corners, adding that it is something drivers will likely get used to over time, but there were instances where he could see less. And Alex Albon added to that by saying that he expects them to struggle more on street tracks rather than an open track where a driver can see far ahead of themselves. Albon also thinks it will be trickier in wheel-to-wheel combat as it's harder to spot where the other car's front wing is versus the tyres. And finally for today, Netflix has confirmed that Season 4 of Drive to Survive will be available to stream from March 11th. That's just 9 days before the opening race in Bahrain and on the same weekend as the official pre-season test at the same venue. Once again, the series will offer unprecedented access and take fans behind the scenes of one of the most intense championship fights in F1 history. And do you know what? Because 2021 was so dramatic, intense, and let's say controversial, hopefully they won't feel the need to fill it with fake drama and team radio from 2 seasons ago. All sarcasm aside, though, I am looking forward to it because it's always interesting to see some of the behind-the-scenes stuff we don't tend to get the opportunity to have a look at. I will say, though, whilst I get these things take a lot of work when it comes to production and distribution, and with the season finishing so late last year, there was not a lot of time, it is still kind of a shame that it falls during testing, given there is a whole week or so to fill between the Alfa Romeo launch and the start of testing. So not an awful lot of content over the winter, but loads in March, which is fine. I'm still very much looking forward to it. That is it for today's roundup then, but you can, as always, let me know your thoughts on the new Ferrari F1-75 and indeed any of the stories featured today in the comments section down below. Are you looking forward to Drive to Survive in March? And before I go, just your usual reminder that this video and this channel are both powered by Motorsport Network, and that includes access to the Motorsport Image archive and the editorial work over at motorsport.com. And as always, you can find all the relevant links in the description down below, as well as links to all the stories featured in today's video. Now, I will be back tomorrow with a video covering the launch of the 2022 Mercedes. But in the meantime, if you did enjoy this one, then please do leave a like, as it really does help the channel in its fight with the pesky algorithm. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on any future videos or streams. But as ever, thank you for watching. I've been Sean, this has been the F1 Word, and until next time, goodbye.